Good morning. I'm Reverend Carrie Holley-Hurt, and I come to you on behalf of your Texas Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry, or TXUUJM, and I am here to preach a message of hope. But I am not here to blow smoke with some Pollyanna message. I am not going to say things that I cannot possibly know. What I'm going to do is ground us in our values and our history so that we can focus on our shared goal of a more loving and compassionate world. That's why we come to church, right? Now, if you aren't feeling hopeful, I get that. It makes sense. If you are grieving, I get that. I am grieving too. If you are enraged by the white supremacy and patriarchy of it all, oh, I get it. I'm enraged too. We have just learned that the values we stand for as a religious people, values that spring from love, like equity and justice and pluralism, are not held by a significant portion of our fellow citizens. That hurts. I know how much that hurts. And for those of us that are queer and trans, or are in the BIPOC community, or are immigrants, it doesn't just hurt. It's terrifying. I know that some of you have worked hard these last few months to get out the vote, and that you were just full of hope that our values would prevail. I can imagine that seeing your hard work comes to what feels like nothing is devastating. I know that you are tired and sad and angry, and probably at times you just want to crawl under the covers and cover up your head. I get it. I have been on that exact same roller coaster over this last week. I've heard so many people say that they felt foolish or naive for hoping. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second. I do not believe for a second that our hope was misplaced or that it did nothing. I believe that the hope we led with impacts people. And I believe that hope is the cornerstone of our faith because it is vital. It is absolutely vital to our spiritual health and to the change we are called to do. Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson said that the abolitionist movement of the 19th century, the movement that helped this nation move away from the violent and dehumanizing institution of chattel slavery, an institution that was the lifeblood of this country's economy. That movement was made up of just 1% of the population. According to Dr. Carter Jackson, that 1% was made up of the most diverse group of people. She says, it's men, it's women, it's white, it's Black, it's people born into freedom and people born into slavery, and fugitive slaves, and wealthy people and poor people. It was religious people and non-religious people. It was people from all walks of life holding the same goal. It was people like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass who knew firsthand the cruelty and violence of the system and still had hope for a better future, a future in which their full humanity was recognized, a future in which this nation would one day live up to its promise of liberty and justice for all. It was our Unitarian forebearer, Theodore Parker, who at the height of the Fugitive Slave Act, when he had to protect his own congregants from slave catchers, preached, I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eyes reach but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. He spoke these words in 1853, a horrible and violent time in this country. Just 4 years later, the nation's Supreme Court would deny citizenship to people of African heritage with the Dred Scott decision. And just a few years after that, the nation would be in a bloody civil war over slavery. So when he said that he believed that the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice, it wasn't because he was watching some linear evolution. It was because he looked at history and he saw all the ways that cruel and greedy men do not prosper forever. But mostly, I believe it was his faith. It was his faith that told him that the world could be better, that we could treat each other better, that the laws of the land could protect everyone. But he didn't just hope. He took that hope and he turned it into action. Even during extremely violent times, he was guided by his hope. And this is because hope has always been fundamental to our faith. It's life-giving to us and to our work, especially in times of violence and despair. But we can't just wait to feel hopeful. Hope, as activist Marian Kaba says, is not optimism. Hope is a discipline, and one we have to practice every single day. This means we don't just wait around for the spirit of hope to hit us. We cultivate it. We cultivate it in ourselves and in our community. And we do this by protecting our energy and using our resources wisely. Instead of doom scrolling or holding vigil next to our televisions, we put our energy into one another. Because when we stay insulated and just continuously inundate ourselves with information, it's the same as going into a condemned building every day to point out a new broken window. Looky there, it's broken. Yeah, the building's condemned. This is not a good use of our time or our energy. Instead, we use our one precious life in the service of hope. We join with those who are facing the most oppression, and we take their lead and we do the work. And in doing that, we are nourished. Our hope is nourished because together is where we are meant to be. It's how we are meant to live. Our communities help us maintain the discipline of hope because our communities lift us up, inspire us. Such a beautiful cycle. Bell Hooks says, one of the most vital ways we sustain ourselves is by building communities of resistance, places where we know we are not alone. And good news, because look around you, you have community. As congregants of this church, you have each other to comfort, to work together, to inspire one another, and most importantly, to help each other stay in that discipline of hope. And you have tools from TXUUJM to help you move deeper into your faith so you can become a more vital community. TXUUJM provides resources to all UU churches, like the Trans Inclusion and Congregation program, for free. They also bring in speakers like Paula Cole-Jones and speakers on the climate, resources that help us grow deeper into our faith and more sophisticated in our work. We also benefit from the work TXUUJM has done to connect us to the larger resistance work. They have been doing the hard work of coalition building so that we can expand who we are in community with. We are tied together through TXUUJM to all 40 of the Texas UU congregations. They provide a platform so that we can work together as UUs all across Texas during the Thursday night action hour, supporting each other in the causes that are near and dear to our communities, pulling all of our resources so that we can do the good work of justice together. And TXUUJM pulls us into communities with other like-minded organizations. Last legislative session, TXUUJM worked with Impact Texas, an interfaith organization, bringing us into community with people from faiths that share similar values, so that together we could raise a religious voice against anti-trans bills and speak in favor of reproductive justice. This last legislative session, we became a vital part of the work that All In for Equality Coalition did and has done since the last legislative session. TXUUJM brought us into communities of resistance with people in organization like Equality Texas, the ACLU, Lambda Legal, and the Transgender Education Network of Texas. TXUUJM is working hard to cultivate those communities so that we can live out our values in good company. When I think of that, when I think about being in good company with all of these diverse people, I can't help but think of those 19th century abolitionists. People of all different backgrounds, all different identities, working together on a shared vision of a world that works for everyone. Isn't that hopeful? Y'all, 1% of the population overcame 400 years of the most brutal institution. I think we can pull hope from that. Now, to my cynical friends out there, to those of you that might be thinking, and a lot of good work that didn't the last legislative session go horribly for our values? And in truth, yeah, it didn't go great, but it could have been a lot worse. We, with our partners, held off a lot of bad legislation. But more importantly, we did a whole lot of good and brought a whole lot of hope into people's lives just by showing up. One of the most powerful things I have come to realize is that our power is in the way we can change the narrative for those that are targeted for marginalization. I'm a minister, a member of TXUUJM, but I'm also a mom. And I'm a mom in a family that the legislature is just loving to target. And I can tell you that being a part of a targeted group, being targeted with so much hate, it is demoralizing. In fact, I think demoralized is actually the point. To demoralize us, to make us feel isolated and small and hopeless. But when UUs showed up, when I saw all those yellow shirts at the Capitol, or I knew that UUs were jumping in on Action Hour or calling their representatives, that cruel message of hopelessness was torn apart. Knowing that my faith community, knowing that people who had no stakes in this legislation showed up for families like mine, made me feel deeply held and profoundly hopeful. Even with session going the way it did, and this new session promising to be even more awful. I have hope. I have hope because I know my community cares for those that are targeted. I know my community cares for those who are being oppressed, marginalized. I know that my community is centered in values that will lead them to show up, to make calls, to write letters, to do the work, to protest again and again and again. And knowing that you are out there, that wipes away so much loneliness and hopelessness. Y'all, we have example after example of people that led with hope to bring about change. Change that we benefit from, change that they might have never got to experience in their lifetime. Not all those that work for change will see the fruits of their labor. But we know, as a people of faith, that we have the responsibility to do the work for those that come. And we have the responsibility to do the work so that those who are being targeted for marginalization and oppression do not feel alone. We cannot let the pain, the loss, the hurt we feel right now cause us to give up our hope or cause us to move away from our values. Because frankly, the consequences are just too high. It is too dangerous for us to give up hope. We must lead with our values and have hope that we are bending that arc towards justice, even when things are tough. And may we not forget that the scoreboard isn't about elections or legislation, but about people loved and cared for. So let us remember that hope is the cornerstone of our faith, one that we cultivate in ourselves and in our communities, so that we can resist hate, violence, and oppression in the halls of power, but most importantly, in the lives of those that are targeted for oppression. This is our work, and it is joyful work. May we be motivated by it, comforted by it, and made hopeful in it. May it always be so.